here in Nairobi means that Kenya is front and centre for us as a bilateral relationship.
Yes.
So you do spend most of your time on Kenya matters, and a lot of my job as a High Commissioner is representational and protocol. It means ensuring you know as many key Kenyans as possible.
Yeah.
And because the UN is here as well, that also is a focus. With the other countries, one has to find time to travel and do the same in terms of making those contacts and ensuring that we know who's who. But inevitably, they don't get as much attention as Kenya does. And Kenya is, for Australia, our most important bilateral partner here in East Africa.
Why is that?
There's a lot of commonalities.
Okay.
Aside from the fact we're both former British colonies, for both Kenya and Australia, we're very much believers in a rules-based global order, and that's what we want to see maintained. And so we see eye to eye on many issues. We vote similarly on many issues. And it's as a result a bilateral relationship which has a lot of feel-good factor to it.
Right. But one of the best things I think that has happened for Kenyan youth especially is the opportunities to study in Australia. You were saying to me a while back that, you know, Perth, a city in Australia, is like a little Kenya, you know. So education, I feel, has been, you know, very valuable relationship between our two countries. What would you speak to those opportunities, those education opportunities, especially to the young people watching?
And there are a few reasons for that. I mean, one is that value for money. We arguably provide a better value product than our competitors. I won't name our competitors, other countries, but we do. But also just the Australian culture is one where every single Kenyan who I've ever spoken to who has been to Australia and studied there has highlighted the warm welcome they received and the way in which they were able to integrate very easily into the Australian way of life. And so that's a powerful means by which Australia is perceived to be a destination of choice.
Yes.
And that's what we're increasingly seeing. And unfortunately, with COVID-19, we saw the lockdown and the resultant inability of international students to come to Australia to study for a few years. Once we reopened our borders in late 2021, the reaction from international students to get back in was immediate. And from Kenya, there's been an absolute groundswell of interest. And here now in Kenya, we have what's called the Kenya-Australia Alumni Association. It's very active. Only yesterday I was in Kajiado launching a project with them, a tree planting project involving the association and the Africa, the Green Africa Foundation. And what's interesting about that association is these are all former Kenyan students at Australian universities who've come back. They're in increasingly important positions of influence and power in not just government but the private sector. And they're very much advertising to everyone that they know and meet the value of going to Australia to pursue higher education. So we're incredibly thankful.
Besides trade and development, education, I know you're also very passionate about women and creatives. Could you just speak to that? So when it comes first to women empowerment, or people in the creative, art, literature, maybe you're a nerd, eh? You're a self-proclaimed nerd.
Yes.
So how have you been able to, just see, or rather embody those passions as a diplomat here with the local community in Kenya?
One of the Australian government's priorities is empowerment of women and girls. We've actually recently appointed a new ambassador for gender equality.
Okay.
And we, here in East Africa, make it a priority of everything we do. And we have a active public diplomacy program, as we call it, that seeks to identify initiatives and activities that we can help support to empower women and girls, and especially in the creative space. I have a big interest in the creatives anyway, and one of the ideas that came from the team back in 2021 was to hold what we call the Women in Creatives event, to create a space for women involved in the creatives here in Kenya to come together and talk about the challenges for women in the creatives. And so we had about 80 individuals representing a whole range of different sectors of the creative space, from radio to TV to the stage, theatre to fashion, music. And it was an incredibly successful event because all those who participated commented that they hadn't been part of what they thought or considered to be a real safe space to be able to freely air their experiences and the challenges they'd faced and continue to face. But it goes to a lot more than just that side of the creatives. We're big on promoting sport as well, and just last month I was up in Turkana. We were sponsoring the inaugural women's football tournament. So women's football is quite popular in the refugee camp in Kakuma, but outside the Kakuma it's very difficult for women